Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Catholic Mama YouTube channel. I'm going to talk today about keeping the peace in times of trouble. So, the past 2 years, a year and a half, have been awful. The rates of mental illness, reports of mental illness, attempted suicides, through the roof. And even if you're not to the point of needing to be clinically diagnosed, uh, I've talked to so many moms. They are having trouble with hair loss and sleep and all this other stuff. And clearly, we are, even the faithful, are feeling it acutely that there's something wrong with the world. And how many times I've thought, oh, Jesus, come back now. uh, but I'm still recording this video and he has not yet returned. Let's talk a little bit about maintaining peace. So just trust in God. To develop that interior peace. You just have to trust in God and pray. And that's true. But how do you grow in trust for God? Just do you say it? Oh, God, I trust you. Do you say, God, help me to trust you? Maybe that can certainly help. But I have struggled with this myself, right? It sounds great. Yes, I want to trust God. I really do. But how do you get there? So, as I was reading a book last night, the answer was presented to me in a really interesting way. So, if you hear pages rustling, that's me looking at this book. It's by Father Robert Spitzer, who really is a prolific writer. He is a host of Father Spitzer's Universe on EWTN, which actually is a really fun show to watch. But he's written a ton of books, and they're meaty. Look at how thick that book is there. So this one is called, I'll show the picture of it even though it's backwards, Christ versus Satan in Our Daily Lives, the Cosmic Struggle Between Good and Evil. This is apparently one of 3 books. So he's got 4 book series called The Quartet, and he also has the trilogy, which is this book is part of. This one discusses moral conversion intellectual conversion, I believe. And then the other books we'll discuss the others, like moral and spiritual conversions. I'll just read it quick from the front cover or the front flap. The book is divided into 2 main parts. 1, the realities of God's goodness and of spiritual evil, and recognizing and overcoming the diabolical tactics of deception, temptation, and sin. I will actually be using this book for those who want to support the Catholic Mama podcast. I have something called the Domestic Church, which is a monthly membership program that helps members cultivate a life of radiant faith. And we do that through a really cool, I think it's cool, virtual book club study. So I'm going to use this book in a few months. I got to get through it first. And it's going to take us it's not just 1 book a month always. Sometimes we split larger books into 2 or 3 part series. So we're going to go through this book in a couple of months. But in the meantime, I came across something yesterday on page 57. So I'm kind of early on this book that I thought was really interesting. So it talks about greater vision and capacity for following opportunities presented by the Spirit. Step 1, you follow the opportunities provided by the Spirit. Now that requires some discernment of spirits. We'll talk about that in a different episode. But then 2, you develop this sense of inspiration, enthusiasm, zeal, contribution, and love. 3, you increase in confidence, trust, and faith in the Spirit. Then 4, you are better able to rely upon the Spirit in times of suffering. So isn't that interesting? You can trust the Holy Spirit. You can trust in God the more that you follow his promptings in everyday life. It's very similar. How we develop relationships with people. We don't, say, hey, I want to trust you, and you do. It takes work for us. So here we follow the promptings of the Holy Spirit in our day-to-day lives that maybe don't involve a bunch of suffering. And then when it comes to tackling suffering, big or small, we then are able to better rely on the Spirit because we've developed a relationship of trust. Okay, so then step 5 is increase in agape, detachment, humility, and other means virtues through grace and suffering. And then 6, a greater sense of peace and home in the God of unconditional love. Well, I just thought this was such an interesting idea. I hadn't seen this before, that there's actually steps and a cycle to developing greater trust in God in times of suffering. And then finding that interior peace as well, even in times of suffering. I hadn't seen it presented like this before. And I thought, well, let's do a quick video about it and see if maybe that helps other people. So really what it comes down to is we can't just assume that we're going to be at peace during suffering if we're not putting in the effort in a day-to-day fashion and understanding the promptings of the Holy Spirit. Now, how do you do that? To begin with, well, you do have to spend that time in prayer, adoration, growing in virtue, right? So that we're just not having like these knee-jerk, possibly sinful reactions to what's happening around us, whether that's angry outbursts, impatience, despair, frustration over when things just don't, like minor inconveniences, when things don't go our way. So we do this in a day-to-day fashion. And then when the larger stuff comes along, or even if we're in the midst of the larger stuff, right? Like I think that we've all are experiencing greater degrees of suffering over the past 18 months. We can switch. We don't have to wait till the next time that suffering happens to actually get our act together. We may find that through these increases in our daily lives of just listening to the promptings of the Holy Spirit, being at peace with that on the regular run-of-the-mill or good stuff, then we're more able to rely on the Holy Spirit in times of suffering. So start small. It starts every day. I used to think that, I would watch like Lord of the Rings. And I think, oh, okay, well, one day I may have like this epic adventure. Well, I'll be, then I'll exude those virtues, or I don't think I knew the word virtue at that point, but then I'll have the strength to endure that kind of suffering. It'll just happen when that happens. No, it's just the same. Like you can't run a marathon, or you can't lift 300 pounds in a deadlift without spending time in training. And our training happens every single day, small increments where we grow in holiness, and we suffer in little bits. The car maybe doesn't start when we want it to, or the kids can't find their shoes, or whatever it is, the electricity bill is higher than what we had budgeted for. Whatever it is, small ways we can trust in God there, listen to the Holy Spirit's promptings in the good and the troubling stuff on our small stuff in our day-to-day lives. Then when it comes to the bigger sufferings, we're able to trust and better rely on God there. And then we find our interior peace. Okay. Makes sense? I think so. Easier said than done. So say your prayers. I actually had a video on prayers that can help wives and moms in the day-to-day life. Go back and watch that. I think that was a good one. And until next time. All right, everyone.